Hello guys, welcome. We are actually going to talk about the human respiratory system today. I know it looks very complicated, but I assure you that it's not as hard as it seems. Let's look at the different parts of the body that are involved in the respiratory system. The first one that we have up here is called the trachea. Now, the trachea is also commonly known as the windpipe. It is kind of, as you can see here, a long tube that leads towards the lung and then divides into the left and right branches. The left and right branches are together known as the bronchi, but individually, if you're looking at it, it will be known as the bronchus. As you can see, the tube divides into the left and right. The right one is known as a bronchus. Now, remember that if you were talking about both of these branches together, we would call them a bronchi, which is the plural form of the bronchus. The bronchi, as you can see here, or the bronchus, actually also further divides into smaller bronchioles. There's a small flap known as the epiglottis that covers your trachea over here. And this is what controls what you drink or eat. The next organ that we are going to look is called the alveoli. Now, alveoli, as you can see here, are these tiny little sacs that comes after the branching of the bronchi or the bronchus. These are like little grapes. As you can see, it looks like a bunch of grapes here, and oxygen is exchanged for carbon dioxide in the alveoli. So this is where the actual exchange process takes place. What that means is that oxygen enters the blood and carbon dioxide is removed out of the blood cells. And these gases exchange by a process called as diffusion that we've already learned about. Remember, diffusion is when the movement of molecules take place in and out of the cell. So this is the alveoli. Just to summarize what we have learned so far, we have the trachea, which is the long tube, which divides into two bronchus. Together they are known as the bronchi. Then the bronchus splits again or branches again, and the grape-like structures are known as the alveoli. This is where oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange take place through diffusion. And the ones that are not looking like grapes are the bronchioles. Now, let's look at another important feature, which is known as the larynx. Now, the larynx has a common name. Can you guess what that is? You guessed it right if you thought the voice box. The larynx is commonly known as the voice box, and it is found below something known as the pharynx. But let's come back to that at a later time. Now, the larynx or the voice box is where our voice comes from. It's where our sound is produced. The air actually from the lung passes through thin, very, very thin tissues in the larynx, and the vibrations in the tissues are what produces the sound. So that is, oh, and I forgot to mention, but this one right here are the lungs, which you already know. So this is where the trachea splits into two parts. So let's note that down. All right, two more left to go. This structure that you see here, this thick structure that you see here is actually something known as the diaphragm. Now, can you guess what the function of the diaphragm is? Take a minute. I can wait. So the diaphragm is actually a sheet of a muscle that spreads through the bottom of the rib cage. Of course, you cannot see the rib cage here because we are only looking at the muscular structures, but it is generally present below the rib cage. And the diaphragm is very flexible. It can contract and it can expand. So when it contracts, the chest volume gets larger, which means that the lung is taking in the air. So take a deep breath. When you're taking that breath, the diaphragm is actually contracting. And when it relaxes, the chest volume gets smaller, which means the air is pushed out of the lungs or you're exhaling the air. So when you leave the breath, the diaphragm just expanded or just relaxed, and the chest volume got smaller, and you just exhaled out the carbon dioxide. So this sheet of muscle right here is what you call a diaphragm. And at last but not the least, this lining that you see here is what we call the pleural membrane. I will spell it in a second, but let's talk about the pleural membrane. So the pleural membrane is kind of like a lining that surrounds the lungs. It contains the secretions that is produced, and it contains a fluid called the pleural fluid that actually creates surface tension that helps maintain the position of the chest, position of the lungs against the chest or the chest wall. It has a slight adhesive quality, and that's actually what causes the lung to remain steady and inhale and exhale rather than just slipping around in the chest cavity. So it has this suction effect or the vacuum effect that keeps everything in the place. So this membrane or this lining right here is the pleural membrane. And there we go. We have all the parts of a human respiratory system. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. And because it says that you had to color the parts of the human respiratory system, I am sharing the answer key with you. This is what I colored, but you can definitely be more creative and take your own shot at making it as pretty or as creative as possible. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Have a good day. Bye.